Welcome everyone to another episode of Two Crime Besties. Hey Emma, how you going?
I am fantastic, Meg. I am off the back of a fairly impromptu trip to Bali with some really gorgeous friends of ours, and feeling relaxed and lovely.
Yeah, nice and chill. You've had enough cocktails to last you for a little bit longer?
Might have. Thank you very much for taking on that easy street update in one of our recent episodes, because that happened while I was away. So
Yeah.
you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Taking one for the team. But
Yes.
I actually think there's another easy street update today. Do you want to give us the background on what's been happening?
There's been a little bit more coming out just slowly about that because now obviously he's been arrested and he's sitting in jail in Rome. That I guess people are just coming forward, you know, who know him of when he was living in Australia and all that sort of thing. So finding out a little bit more information about who he was, because his name's been released and now that's gone off the top of my head what his name is. But he's an interesting character in this. Was, as we said in the episode, he was in the file all along. So he was a 17-year-old.
Love that for Ron.
Oh, Ron has it all the time. He's all over that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he was 17 at the time and he was attending Collingwood College, which is the school where Susan Bartlett was a teacher at, teaching arts and crafts. So there is a connection there where they may have known each other. So that's curious.
Although is that his brother came out to say that?
I think so.
I think so. But now his brother's come out again to say, oh, actually, I got it wrong. He wasn't there. But although other people have then also come out to say he was there. Anyway, his name is Perry Corumbulas.
There we go. That's it.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I said that wrong.
No, yeah, you can jump online. You can find there's now photos been released of him and stuff, so you can see what he looks like. But yeah, so he's he was pulled over on the night, which I find interesting. He was obviously driving, which I don't know whether he was legally driving or not at 17.
I don't know if you were allowed to get your license back then at 17.
I don't know. But anyway, he was driving, pulled over, and he had the knife in the boot, which he told police at the time he just was he saw it on the at a railway station, and so he picked it up. So the knife was tested and to be found to be the knife involved. However, they've seemed to have just believed that story, that he's picked it up and it's not related to him.
Because when we were doing our research for this, we believed the knife was found at a train station. Yeah.
So that's who it was found by. So, yeah, I've put a few things together since in terms of that, and that seems to be, So to me that seems curious as to why that wasn't followed up further at the time. Mm-hmm. But anyway.
Although maybe we just didn't know. And maybe they couldn't pin anything on him at the time. We don't know. The fact that he was interviewed, okay, yes, he had the murder weapon in his car.
Yeah.
Surely the police would be extremely suspicious of that. Whether they could prove anything. Obviously, they weren't able to prove anything further to that at that point.
So until the DNA evidence basically was being followed through, they had their list of 130 odd suspects that they were weeding out slowly. And I don't think that was being done in a hurry by any means. So they were weeding those out. Obviously, those top sort of 8 that we mentioned in our episode were ruled out quite quickly through that DNA evidence. And he was still on their list and they were getting to him, but he skipped the country and so therefore wasn't tested. But they have since tested a family member and it was a match. So interesting. Obviously, they still would want to do a direct test on him.
Yeah.
To confirm that.
For sure.
But obviously, this was enough for them to go that, they need to be looking into this guy. Yeah. But they had to keep it all so quiet because they needed him to move out of Greece to be able to arrest him.
Basically just waiting, weren't they?
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, sometimes you think, the cops are doing nothing and they're terrible at their job, whatever. But I think we have to have that understanding that sometimes they do just need to keep quiet to do their job. So,
and we don't know everything.
We don't know everything.
No.
Yeah.
So good on Vic Pol.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it sounds like, look, everything will come out as it comes out, but they've got somebody who they, very strongly suspect was involved in this crime, and we're just waiting now for extradition to Victoria. So he's still in Rome.
Which is a really long process. It could be 6 months or more before we actually get him out of Rome at this point because of there's quite a huge appeal process that occurs. So once it has to get to quite a few levels of appeals, which he'll appeal all of them because he's currently saying he's got nothing to do with this. So he will appeal at all levels, they believe. So it could be a long time before we see anything and have him here in Australia to then have a trial.
Yeah.
But well, we'll just keep you updated as we find things.
Yeah, we'll keep doing updates as we learn more information about the case. The other one I wanted to bring up actually before we start today's case was the Menendez brothers.
Have you been watching the new Netflix series?
I started it not last night, but the night before.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know about you, but I find when we're researching a case, I really need to focus on that one case. Otherwise, other things get in my head and then I get facts and ideas muddled up.
Yeah.
So anyway, Peter and I were just sort of looking for something to watch the other night together, and I'm like, oh, let's give it a go because you've spoken to me about it. Tell us your take on the interpretation. So this is a recently released, it's called Monsters on Netflix. It's definitely brought the Menendez case to a lot more people, and I've actually had several work colleagues mention to me, oh my God, I listened to your case. Yeah. And then I've watched Monsters and wow, it's a really different interpretation on it. So tell me what you think knowing that now that like, you've watched the whole thing.
Yeah. I wasn't a fan of the Netflix series. And the thing is, I think you've got to remember it's a dramatisation. It isn't like completely and utterly factual. Yeah. Because watching it did frustrate me because of a lot of the facts that I knew of the case were altered in that show. I had a sort of a take on it where I was like, oh, okay, maybe they're playing it out of like they're presenting it in a way of like how people could have seen it and then flipping it and, oh no, this is actually how their perception of it. Interesting kind of way to film the show, I think, but it still didn't work for me. I don't know. Okay. It didn't. Yeah, I don't know. I think because I have a degree of empathy for them, and that show wants you to think they're monsters, and I can't come at them being pure monsters, because of what they was inflicted upon them.
Yeah. So the series basically implies that maybe didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm getting that vibe already. As I said, I haven't watched right through to the end yet, but that's gross to me because there's so much evidence to support the fact. And we talk about this in our episode. If you haven't listened to our episode on the Menendez brothers, please go back and have a listen because we make our feelings very much known. You mentioned when we were chatting about it the other day that there's another documentary coming out.
There is another documentary coming out where Eric Menendez particularly, I'm not so sure of Lyle, what he's had involvement in it, but particularly Eric has had some input into that documentary. Okay. Whether they interview him or whether he's just given advice on the background, I don't know yet. It hasn't been released. Okay. But there is another one coming out very soon, and I think that could be a more factual. So it depends on what you're looking for. Look, I really enjoyed this. So this was also made by the same people who did the Dharma one.
Oh, yeah.
And I really liked that.
Yeah, that was good.
But I just wonder whether because I had researched Menendez brothers so heavily and had such an understanding of it, that it just influenced my opinion on it. I've heard other people also come to me and kind of go, I don't really like it. Like, so I don't know, biased, I don't know, but listen to our podcast maybe if you want the facts of what the case actually ensured.
Yeah. And then you can make your own judgment. But I guess it's a reminder to watch everything quite critically. Like, everybody has their own agenda. And I mean, even when we're researching things, like I know you're the same. We tend to form an opinion, which we're very sort of vocal about when we're talking through the episodes. I think you guys have an idea of what we think at the end of the day. But everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and we're super curious to hear what everyone has to say.
Yeah. No, I'd love to hear, opposing thoughts on it and, try and change our minds and our opinions.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm very careful with my research in that generally, not that I'm going to get everything right, but I don't generally take things as fact until I've seen it in a number of places, that sort of stuff, and check my reputable sources. Yeah. Which is why I think when I watched it, I was like, I don't think so.
Yeah, there's even watching the episodes that I have so far, there's a few things I'm like, well, I know that didn't happen and I know that happened that way. And yeah. So I guess they've taken some creative license to make it more entertaining or whatever.
But they've definitely made the two boys unappealing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative thing, because at the end of the day they did do what they did.
Yep.
But context is a lot.
Absolutely, especially in this case. Oh, in any case, but especially in this case.
Yeah.
All right.
But yes, interesting.
Should we get into today's case then?
Let's do that. So this one, I think we sort of thought wasn't going to be a big one until you get into it and sort of start researching it and go, there's actually a fair bit here. So today we're going to talk about Karen Ristevski. So Karen Ristevski was from Avondale Heights in just western suburbs of Melbourne, which again is in our sort of local-ish to us, on the other side of town to us. Yep. So this case is fairly recent. So it's very fresh in our minds. I know I remember a lot of this occurring in real time. So but the thing is, now researching it, it's like you sort of get a different perspective, I guess, of what you saw from the news, 4 or 5 years ago when this was occurring, or longer than that now, isn't it? Actually more like 8 years ago. We'll get into it.
Now, before we get into it, we need to discuss some pronunciations.
Oh, yeah, as we do.
Karen's husband, who is a pivotal character in this story. So his name is, well, we were talking about the pronunciation of his name. We've decided to call him throughout this podcast Boris. Mm-hmm. His name is actually Borce. We've also heard on different publications and in different podcasts when we've been researching this, people calling him Borce.
Yeah.
There is a home video in which he refers to himself as Boris, and that's why we've decided to go down that path. A lot of the more reputable news agencies who've also covered this story also call him Boris, so that's what we're doing. Yep. But it's probably worth noting that his name is actually Borce, and probably pronounced Borce, traditionally.
We dare say he's Australianised it and gone with Boris, as as we tend to do here in Australia.
That's it. So Boris and Karen. So Karen was born in Wellington in New Zealand on the 7th of Feb 1969. Boris and Karen had a daughter together named Sarah. There is a lot of information about Sarah out on the internet. She's been interviewed by a very prominent program in Australia, 60 Minutes. It's a very interesting interview, and we are going to talk about that a lot today.
Yeah.
But definitely go and have a watch, because it really informs what a lot of the opinions that we've had for the episode today. Boris actually has a son from a previous relationship as well, Anthony. He lived with Karen, Boris and Sarah during his teen years, but in his 20s and at the time of Karen's disappearance and subsequent known murder, he wasn't living with the family at the time. And again, we will get into his involvement in this sort of later on down the track.
Yep.
So Karen went missing from their beautiful Avondale Heights home on the 29th of June in 2016. It was a Wednesday morning.
Yep.
Nothing sort of out of the ordinary according to everybody around her. She left home at 10 o'clock in the morning after what Boris describes as an argument over money. So Karen and I guess, did Boris co-own that the clothing business?
I believe so. I believe it was family business. They were, he was in on it as well.
Did he work at all in that business?
I got a vibe that potentially he may have maybe had a little bit of to do with the books, maybe on an odd occasion, but
okay. Well, he was certainly not all that happy. This is all according to him at this point. He wasn't happy that the day's takings from the day before were only $850 and it wasn't enough to sort of make ends meet for the business, so they had a clothing store called Bella Blue was it Water Gardens Shopping Centre.
Yeah.
They had also, within the previous months, they had a second site that they'd actually closed down at a different shopping centre in Melbourne. So obviously the business wasn't going all that well.
Yeah, there was a fair bit of debt attached to the business.
Yeah, I believe the business itself had a roughly $600,000 debt, and as a couple, they had around $1 million debt. Is that about right?
1.2 million, including a mortgage, some credit card debt. Yeah.
So there's a significant amount of money owing. Yeah. And so, look, I can understand if you're owning your own business, that's a really tough gig. And if you're in that amount of debt, absolutely, you'd be watching the books every single day.
Yeah.
According to Boris, he's had this argument that, you know, there's only been $850 worth of takings. I believe Water Gardens Shopping Centre had actually, like, they'd been, like, looking for their money. So things were really tight.
Hadn't been paying rent.
Hadn't paid rent, or they were definitely owing rent.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Boris is saying they've had an argument about the previous day's takings. Now, mind you, Sarah was home this morning previous to the argument.
Yeah.
But Boris was just watching TV on the couch while Karen was in the study trying to sort of work on the books and figure out what to do. I think she was actually looking at potentially... was she looking at another line of clothing or
I think she was looking at some designs and stuff and what colours she might order of certain things for the store.
Right. So she's
asked Sarah's opinion on colours or something. And
right. So she's looking to try and, I don't know, further the business in some way, obviously.
Doing some buying or whatever. To add to the range or something in the store. Yep.
So she's, according to Boris, they've had this argument and she's left the house.
So Sarah left she was doing an internship or something.
Yes, she was. Yeah. She was I think now she's a graphic designer. So I believe she was doing an internship in that field. She just turned
21 a few weeks prior, and had left the morning herself to go off to do this bit of a job that she was doing. So she wasn't home. I think she might have left sort of 8:30ish in the morning or something. Mm-hmm. And then so this is all sort of, according to Boris, has taken part. This argument has taken place after Sarah has left.
Yeah.
So they've had their argument, and according to him, she's then left the house to cool down after an argument. And then as the days progressed, Sarah has been trying to contact her, just as she does. She's very close with her mum and her dad. And there has been no response from Karen throughout the day, from text messages or phone calls that Sarah has made. Obviously, she's gotten home from her day's work as well, and mum's not home. Boris has explained to her, mum's gone out for a walk to cool off. We had a bit of an argument. She hasn't come back, but she's fine. And they've headed out for the evening for dinner at his parents' house, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they've headed there for the evening. Again, no sign of Karen when they come home from dinner, and they head off to bed with still no sight.
Yeah, so her. Sarah describes this as like she was sort of a bit taken aback. Like her mum and dad had had arguments before, and her mum had gone for a walk or gone for a coffee or, just sort of left the house to cool off a little bit, but had never been gone for this long. And I think Boris kind of dismissed any concerns that Sarah had, basically saying, yeah, she'll be right. I'm sure she's just with a friend or whatever.
She'll probably be staying in a friend's house or something.
But that wasn't
typical.
That had never happened before. She'd always come home and, at least by the time it was time for bed, or I think even sooner, generally speaking.
Yeah. So
Sarah was quite concerned. Now, she's a 21-year-old woman, but she's still living in the home of her mum and dad. So that's a difficult position for an adult child to be in.
You trust your dad. He was the one there with her, when she's left the house, I guess.
But the fact that she hadn't been able to contact her mum all day, that'd definitely raise some suspicions.
Yeah, for sure. I think the type of person Boris is,
I think you're right.
would be pretty overbearing in terms
and it'd
of
be hard to argue against it for sure.
Yeah.
So they've gone to bed, and then the next morning, obviously Karen hasn't returned to the house, and they've decided to go to Avondale Heights Police Station to report her missing. According to Sarah, the constable who took the initial report was very dismissive. She said he basically said that, oh, she's probably at the pokies, just give it a couple more hours and wait until she comes home.
Yeah.
Sarah and Boris, see, why they wouldn't say, if I was reporting my husband missing and a police officer said that to me, I'd be like, well, no, he literally never goes to the pokies.
Yeah.
No, you need to listen to me. This is so out of character for him.
Yeah.
But they didn't, well, Boris certainly didn't do that.
No,
and I guess Sarah would have
him.
taken the lead from Boris at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been latched onto for Boris in terms of like, oh, they're dismissing us there. Because he apparently then said, come back at midday if she still hasn't been, heard from. So I do think that there's a bit of the police sort of playing it a little bit to see what's the reaction from people if we play it cool. I mean, cops are notoriously known for keeping their cool in situations and making sure that their demeanour is kept low, and then the reaction of other people is what they watch for.
That's actually a really good point.
Yeah, so I think if they had stood there and said, no, she doesn't do the pokies, this is not okay, we need help now, I do think that maybe something more would have happened. I'd be surprised if it wouldn't have. Yeah. That would be really shit house. And if that's the case, then, that's really poor on that police officer.
From all accounts, they kind of just went, oh, okay, we'll come back in.
Yeah, because I think that would have been Boris leading that, and he would have, clearly he didn't really want her being looked for, so I think he would have walked out of there going, oh, yeah, shit cops, and he's used all of that to his advantage then with Sarah.
Yeah. That's an interesting take, and I think absolutely valid. Yeah, it's just horrible. I mean, he was playing the concerned husband right from the get-go, wasn't he?
Yeah, yes, playing.
The interesting thing is, at this point when they've gone to the police, they hadn't contacted any of Karen's friends.
No, he hadn't rung anybody to find if she was staying the night with, where she'd stayed the night. None of that. He had not made a single phone call. So it wasn't until midday when they did go back to the police station that, that's when the cops did kick into gear and people and friends were contacted and told or asked the question, have you seen Karen? Because, Boris hadn't done any of that prior to that. I mean, which again, she's a 21-year-old woman. Wouldn't you think she could even jump on the phone to an auntie or a friend or something and say, hey, have you seen Mum? Because I can't get hold of her, which I find all very interesting.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
We will get further into why we think that is probably a little bit later on in the episode. But needless to say, that didn't happen. No. And the police were the first ones to contact close friends and family at that point when they've gone back at midday and been like, well, she still hasn't shown up. Yeah. They've contacted friends and family, none of whom had seen her or heard from her.
No.
What had she supposedly taken with her when she went for this walk?
Yeah, so she's taken supposedly her phone and her handbag. Was there anything else that she took with her?
No, I think that was it.
But still, I mean, who takes the handbag to go for a walk to cool down? I mean, I can note your phone, definitely.
Yeah,
but
They lived in Avondale Heights, and their house, it's a stunning house. It was worth 1.1 million Australian dollars. So a really nice family home. It backed onto the Maribyrnong River, and there were walking tracks all along there. So you would think if she was going to go for a walk to cool off after an argument, she'd go for a wander along
an hour
the
or
river.
So,
But I wouldn't take my handbag for a wander. We've got a creek out the back of our house.
Yeah.
I might, I do. I take my phone and my dog.
Yeah, exactly. Most important things.
Yeah, and that's it. A poop bag.
Yeah.
Not for me.
You or?
I knew you'd go there. So, it's just really bizarre that, he... Oh, I don't know. It right from the get-go, there's so many red flags that make me go,
Absolutely. And I do think the cops were onto it pretty quickly, to be honest, that there was more to this.
I think the police have later come out to say that they suspected Boris's involvement from very early on.
Yeah.
And so he was definitely watched under that sort of lens for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was within the first few days even of the of her being reported missing that they put a device on his vehicle, which unfortunately either they don't really know whether he took it off or whether it fell off, but they query which one.
Yep.
Yeah, so they were definitely keeping an eye on him for sure,
Yeah.
of what his movement was and what was going on with him, because they did suspect something.
Yeah, I feel like there was another tactic that was used. They put Boris and Sarah in front of the media
Yes.
a couple of days after Karen was reported
Yeah, on July
missing.
4th, yep.
And so this was the first press conference that the family kind of was involved with. It was at the front of the Avondale Heights police station, and his behaviour, like, you can again go on YouTube and you can see the whole press conference. His behaviour is bizarre. Sarah is clearly incredibly distressed. Like, it's actually quite confronting
it's
to watch.
awful. Yeah.
Because you can easily put yourself in her shoes. Not that we will hopefully ever know what that feels like.
Yeah.
But you can see the absolute agony in her and the distress in her.
Yeah.
And the perceived distress in Boris.
Yeah. He's interesting. That's for damn sure.
He's got this like really gruff look on his face. Like, it's not, there's nothing soft about him. There's nothing, it's like he looks angry, actually.
Yeah, he looks angry.
Police are kind of, as we said, are quite suspicious, and
They interviewed him about July 8th, I think it was. They actually pulled him in for his first formal interview in what he knew of the situation, which obviously at that point he denied any wrongdoing, other than just he kept actually going back over at that point even about sort of dismissing that it wasn't, their finances were fine, even though they had an argument. He kept really reiterating this fact around, like, but we're not in a dire situation with our finances, and was like trying to like justify that, and the cops were quite taken aback by that, because there was really no concern in that interview around where Karen was. It was more about justifying that, that their finances aren't as bad as it sounds. And
like, if you're in $1.1 million of debt that you can't finance on a monthly basis, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, and Boris was not really working at the time. He had like odd jobs. He was an Uber driver for a bit. He did like construction labouring, like as in like
just here and there.
There
was
was nothing
consistent.
No.
So to me, if you're in a family situation where you've got a business that's running that, needs some help to get going properly, which isn't going great, and then what's he doing? Sitting around watching TV? Like, why isn't he working? Why isn't he going out and paying the mortgage so that the business can pay for itself, rather than the money out of the business having to pay for the mortgage as well as all the other debt? And they're living a pretty huge lifestyle in that,
Well, they had really expensive cars. Like Karen's car was a Mercedes, like a really like sort of later model Mercedes. And they were certainly portraying a certain image out there.
Yeah. I mean, there's no one, we're talking here 2016, 2017, even then, trying to live off of one wage for a family, is pretty difficult. I mean, I can't imagine sitting there going, it's sweet, the wife's business is going to pay for all of us to live this life of luxury.
$600,000 in debt.
Yeah. I can't understand.
You'd hope that eventually that might be the case, but you can't just pretend like that's happening before it's actually happening.
Yeah, but they're hard work. Like, you've got to put in what, you get out of it.
Well, it's a 7-day a week. Like, she was working in retail in a major shopping centre over that side of town. Like, that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
a lot of hours. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. But I guess the biggest crack really showed for Boris at a second interview. I can't speak.
Press conference.
In front of the media, then on July 14th. So this was really interesting. So Patricia Gray, who was Karen's aunt, came forward, and so she was the one out the front speaking, and Boris and Sarah were standing behind her during this one. And so the idea was to, again, just put that call out to, if anyone knows anything or seen anything, come forward, and immediately a Channel 7 reporter asked the question, well, Boris, did you kill your wife? And the reaction from him was pretty awful. I mean, they shut it down very quickly.
Well, the look on his face is really interesting because he kind of looks stunned.
Yes.
And then he is like, his mouth kind of like puckers, and the press conference gets immediately shut down, and it's.
But even like the auntie's reaction, to me, you sense there's a little bit of that she's maybe on the cusp of thinking that Boris is part of this. She
kind of not been thinking it.
Totally, because you can sense. She even says like, she goes, "Oh, I think that's an inappropriate question," but her reaction isn't no. Like it's not an immediate defense. Do you know what I mean? It was more of a
I have not been prepped on how to answer this.
And I want to say, get onto it. Like, I feel like that she was definitely thinking already.
Look, you know, I guess the police investigate those closest to missing people / murder victims, because it's often the people closest to you that will perpetrate these types of crimes.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's understandable that Boris was interviewed in those early days and the police had their suspicions. The police aren't idiots.
No.
They know what they're looking for and they know the kinds of behaviours that they're looking for. And I feel like Boris kind of played right into them right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And surely the family would have had a similar sentiment, although you probably would never want to believe the worst of your family member.
It'd be so hard because the fact of the matter is, even though you're thinking it and going, oh my God, I think he would have done it, the cops have got to still build their case. Even though you think that you're on the money and you're like, he definitely did it, you've got to have the evidence to actually get him to trial.
But if you think about like Karen's family and you think, okay, her sister, her auntie, whatever, you wouldn't want to believe that her husband had done that to her because that's just so close and so difficult. And that would blow. I mean, the fact that Karen was missing and at this point presumed deceased.
Well, I mean, that's the thing they're first grappling with, isn't it? It's that first idea of, hey, this isn't looking good that she's going to turn up alive.
For you then to be like, oh my God, this is potentially at the hand of our family member, the husband that she's brought into our family, that would be, oh my God.
I can't even imagine.
I can't even.
No.
Yep. It's.
I think that it was about this point though where Vasco inserts himself into this, which is Boris's brother. Vasco Ristevski comes out at this point and says, "Oh, it's all right, people. It's okay. Everyone was all right. She's alive. She's just in China.
She's gotten herself a fake passport, so don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
It's cool. Like the fact that she hasn't used her actual passport, don't worry.
No.
Because it's a fake one. She's just living it up in China.
Yeah, because I mean, I know that I'd be able to go and get a fake passport tomorrow. What? Like, nope. Not everyone knows how to do that, I don't think.
Vasco. That's just, I mean, most people don't know how or where or literally wouldn't do that.
No.
So the fact that for him that was like, oh, it's an easy one. Oh, know exactly what's happened.
It's all good. It's all good, peeps.
Fucked off to China on a fake passport. He's quite the character.
He is, but he comes back into the picture a little bit later on with some interesting stuff too. So
just real quick on his little fake passport story. Oh, yeah. The police obviously looked into it. There was literally nothing to suggest that had happened.
No.
She'd also never used a cent of money out of she'd withdrawn no cash from their account. She'd used no credit card, no bank card. She hadn't used her Medicare card, so she hadn't been to a doctor. She hadn't attended a hospital, nothing. There was no digital footprint for this woman.
Other than the mobile phone tracking. Yeah. So that was so at this point they'd sort of worked that the mobile phone had been pinging off of a tower towards Mount Macedon.
Yeah, so this was along the Calder Freeway.
Yeah.
And it had sort of, they were able to track Boris and Karen's phones going a certain distance up the Calder Freeway towards the Macedon Ranges.
Yeah. And Boris's phone was turned off in about 25 minutes into that trip.
That's right.
But Karen's phone stayed on for longer. It was turned off eventually.
About 2 hours.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So they knew that Boris was either been with Karen on this trip, or but the phone was definitely in that trip. So I think I'm trying to remember when they released. It was a bit further on when they released that footage of the car. I remember it being on the news really predominantly, where they got some CCTV footage as well of the black Mercedes driving along near Diggers Rest, I think it was.
Yeah, it was near Diggers Rest.
Yeah.
They actually didn't release that footage until after her body was found in 2017, in Feb of 2017. So
they were hunting for anything, because they were following the route of obviously thinking, okay, this is where the mobile phones are kind of pinging from towers. They can only pick up so much, information in terms of where that they actually are. It's only a direction that they're heading, really. Mm-hmm. So I guess then they would have been hunting every CCTV with on all the roads and things to try and see if they can spot a car that looks familiar. But
I wonder what the difference is between 2017 CCTV / dash cams and 2024. I feel like every car on the road now has a dash cam.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more again now than there would have been then.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we're not that far removed from it. It's, what is it, 7 years ago?
Yeah, it's not that long ago, but I think you'd still find there'd been an increase for sure. And even just the quality of the video that you'd get.
Exactly. Yep. I just feel like there'd be... The only thing that might have hindered it was the passage of time.
Yeah.
So, we've got dash cams in our cars, and I think there's a rolling 48 hours or something, or maybe a rolling 96 hours actually.
Yeah.
But then it just records over
itself.
Yeah,
it doesn't
itself.
go to the cloud kind of thing or anything.
I don't.
You pay extra maybe to do that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think so. So we've got it for if we're in an accident or someone hits our car or something. You can press a button. If you press a button on it, it'll record it.
Yeah,
and you'll have that forever.
Yeah.
But so, maybe timing would have played a part in this if there were more dash cams, if there were dash cams around potentially.
Yeah, maybe.
But the fact that they were able to get this CCTV many, many months later makes me think that they probably had it a lot earlier than...
I think so. I think that they were
releasing
things when it was suited to them to get the information they needed, for sure. Yeah, so basically they started looking and actually started doing full searches of areas in that north region, sort of to learn valley, started looking bushland. They actually drained some dams and scoured all the bushland and grasslands in a particular area where they thought maybe could be a potential area for her body. However, it wasn't until February 20th, 2017, so that they actually found Karen's body. There were a couple of guys working out in the Mount Macedon region.
Yep, a couple of brothers.
They were tapping a pine tree or something like that, doing something around out in the area,
Some kind of research or something. I think, or they were
horticultural people. I don't know. Doing stuff with trees.
They were sort of more off the beaten track than a normal day walker, sort of, a day hiker from the city might be.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so they got this waft of a smell, which was like, what the hell is that? And so they started looking around to sort of see what this smell was, and unfortunately came across some remains that were sort of poking out of the ground near these trees that were laying. Two trees had sort of fallen near each other and creating this kind of V shape. And there was a skull, I believe, and a foot that was sort of coming out of the ground, which obviously, animals had sort of disrupted the scene a little bit as well. And so, they called the police in pretty quickly. Took an extra day, obviously, to then actually confirm that, unfortunately, it was the remains of Karen Ristevski found in Mount Macedon.
Her body was incredibly decomposed at the time, so I think it was 8 months following her disappearance that her body was found. So it had been out in, sort of over summer. Animals had certainly played a part in disturbing the remains. And when the autopsy was done, her body was so badly decomposed that they were actually unable to establish a cause of death.
Yeah.
So they looked at whether or not she was potentially strangled or shot or stabbed or, lots
or
of
head injury or something. Or
but nothing was conclusive. So I guess the the police at the time had sort of been putting together a narrative of what they thought had happened on the day, and the inference from them was that an altercation had happened in the home following an argument about the money. They kind of thought that that was probably very likely. And something had come about that meant Karen met an untimely end. So there were a couple of different ways they sort of thought that might have happened. They thought maybe Boris had pushed her and she'd fallen and hit her head on something, and that had caused her death, or that he'd actually strangled her.
Yeah.
The police forensically investigated the house at the point that they'd found Karen's body. They were able to obtain a warrant to search lots and lots of different things in the house. So not only looking for forensic evidence, but they were also able to seize laptops and other digital devices. They basically tore the house apart and checked everything. They did not find any blood or any microscopic particles of any kind in terms of DNA in that house. So I think at that point the police were pretty satisfied that Boris had probably strangled her. Now, we know, because we're true crime buffs or two crime besties, that generally speaking, if somebody has been strangled, their hyoid bone has been damaged.
Yeah.
And that was certainly looked at upon autopsy, but her hyoid bone had been removed or
it had been dislodged.
Yeah.
But they just couldn't rule out whether or not that had happened due to animals in the area, or whether that had happened in the process, unfortunately.
To this day, Boris hasn't come forward with how Karen's murder happened, so we actually don't know. Her autopsy report to this day states that her cause of death is unknown. Or it's
what do they deem it as? A foul play of sorts. But
there was no conclusive evidence to support a cause of death.
Yeah. So in amongst all of this of, Karen's body being found, and also at that time, pretty soon after that, the cops really ramped up their focus on Boris. And lo and behold, at this point, his son, Karen's stepson, Anthony Rickard, steps into the picture and out of nowhere decides to throw a spanner in the works and says, well, Karen was and I were having an affair.
We were doing it.
Yeah. Since I was living with them when I was a teenager, we were having an affair, and our plan was always to run off together when she was 21, when Sarah was 21.
Yep.
And that this was, all because of the relationship between him and Karen, that's probably why this happened to her.
Now, there is literally zero evidence.
Yeah.
Every single person, including Boris, including Sarah, every single person who is involved in this story says that is absolutely, unequivocally not true. This guy's a fucking fruit.
Oh, he's quite an interesting character. I mean, he's clearly had an interesting childhood by the sounds of things.
Yeah.
I mean, when it even got to court for this case, he was meant to give evidence at the court hearing. His house was raided the day before. He was refusing to give evidence at the trial, but he was actually the house was being raided for other reasons. And he was arrested for hiding from the police to avoid to give evidence, but also for drug charges as well as other things. So he clearly had a bit of a rap sheet of his own and a bit odd. It was just a bit odd.
Incredibly odd.
Yeah.
He ended up, did he go to prison?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he had his own shit going on, and he obviously wasn't the most upstanding member of society.
Oh, no, because that's the thing. That was right. There was also, there was the drugs that he was being, there was a warrant out for his arrest for some drugs, as well as a breach of an IVO as well. So
that's right. Fucking throw him in jail and
Yeah. So clearly apple don't fall far from the tree, unfortunately, I don't think, really, to be honest. So, yeah, he was an interesting character. My favourite part about him, though, when he came into this story was that he was determined. He was like, that his dad did this, which is not often that you have the kid coming out, going, it's my dad.
Because Sarah's completely the opposite. She's like, Dad did not do this anyway.
No.
Yep.
So Anthony came out and he said, I knew that he did it like as soon as I saw him on that first media release, right? And he goes, I saw it in his eyes. One eye shitting at himself and the other one, like a little Terminator. I knew he did it.
One eye shitting himself.
The other one like the little Terminator.
Oh, mate. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
So interesting character just to throw in there at that point when everyone's reeling from stuff. So gotta love that.
Yeah.
So then at this point, obviously, so they started ramping up looking at Boris, but they get to the point of they get to have a funeral for Karen, which I just think that this is utterly gross.
Oh, it's so gross.
Boris was, obviously, he still wasn't arrested or anything. It was they were just getting closer and closer to getting him, but he hadn't been arrested yet. So he was at the funeral and he carried her. He was one of the pallbearers for her coffin, carried it out of the church, and he was just filmed by, obviously media were far away, but from a distance they filmed him just putting on this show of, emotion.
He was the grieving husband. He was bawling his eyes out. He was a pallbearer at the front, so he was one of the front on one side
next to
and
her
brother on the other. And her brother says now that he knew at that point that Boris had done it, and he had to go along with it because at that point he hadn't been arrested.
No.
Can you imagine?
Oh, it'd be awful. I can't even that would just be dreadful. Just even to this day, that would give you the absolute shits that he was there grieving. Like you don't get the right to grieve.
He wasn't grieving.
No.
He was just putting it on for show. And Sarah bought it hook, line and sinker, their daughter. Mm-hmm. She believed her dad obviously from the minute she asked him where her mum was.
Yep.
On the day that she went missing. It's pretty horrific. About coming up to a year after Karen's disappearance, Vasco makes another little appearance in this story. Do you know about this?
Yep. I love this.
Oh, this is like my favourite. What was it, a Channel 7 show? Or was it Channel 9?
I can't remember now.
Might have been a 60
I think it was Channel 9. I think it was Current Affair.
Current Affair. No, you're right. It was absolutely a Current Affair. You're right.
Yeah.
A Current Affair were doing a story like sort of updating everyone on what had been going on and whatever. And so they were out at the site where Karen's body was found with an expert, the gorgeous.
Oh, my God.
Charlie Bazina. Now, he's an ex-homicide detective with Victoria Police, and he is... Meg and I love him, but I have to say, Meg, this is a bit of a tangent.
Oh, no, go for it. I love a tangent.
My mum loves him more than we do.
No, she loves Ron.
No, well, okay, so
no.
I was telling Mum about this case, and I was telling her that Charlie makes a bit of an appearance in this episode. When I was researching, I'm like, don't worry, I'll mention him. She's like, good. And I was like, oh, but I know he's not your favourite. Ron's your favourite.
Yeah.
Ron Iddles, our other amazing, esteemed ex-Victorian homicide detective. And she's like, actually, no, I actually feel like, she's like, I think Charlie's my number one.
No, it can't be.
I know. I'm like,
I've seen her drool over Ron.
But she also, she's pretty... goes a bit weak at the knees for Charlie too.
No, but the Ron thing makes sense to me entirely. Whereas Charlie for me doesn't make as much sense because Ron looks like your dad.
He does. Ron actually does look like my dad.
There is a real resemblance there. So I'm shocked, Lynn. I'm shocked.
But there you go.
Okay,
Sorry, that's a bit of an aside.
I can't argue with her because I think Charlie Bazina is amazing too. But I thought she was a Ron all the way.
Yeah, we've seen them both talk live, and they are both incredible human beings.
Yeah.
And thank God we had them in VicPol, because their expertise is certainly informed. And Ron's conviction rate is insane.
Yeah,
amazing. They are incredible detectives, and they still consult on cases to this day, which is what
he was out there
Charlie
doing.
was out there doing. So he was, doing a media piece about Karen's. What was upcoming to be the anniversary of Karen's disappearance. And while they're there, who pops up? Our mate Vasco.
Walks out of the bush.
Walks out of the bush while they're filming, and he is absolutely caught unawares.
Yeah.
Now, what the fuck was he doing in the bush on a random day? Not on the actual anniversary. It was a few weeks before.
Yeah.
What was he doing out there?
He shat himself, I'll tell that much.
Yeah.
It's all on
the
video.
The
footage
of it is so funny.
Gold.
Yeah.
That guy, I mean, what on earth? I don't even know if I can wrap my head around it in this way. But to me, this screams guilt from Boris, even in that, to me, he's confessed to his brother what he's done.
Yep.
And the brother's potentially headed out there, because this is where Charlie's damn good at what he does. He's gone out there, I reckon, to just check if there's any other evidence left that cops could find to link his brother to this, because Charlie said, quoted on the media thing, saying that he could see that there'd been somebody digging around the area, and he couldn't completely rule out that it wasn't animals. But he could certainly see that there'd been some scratchings around the areas and some digging happening in the vicinity of where her body had been found. So it's just, to me, Charlie Bazzina was onto it. He reckons that, I think he really does think that Vasco was out there double checking to make sure there wasn't something else that could be found to link his brother up to this.
So do you think Vasco was involved?
I don't know about involved, but certainly aware and knew. And I reckon his brother probably confessed to him what happened.
I think
and his
so.
brother was trying to, he was thinking he'd go and protect his brother and go and check the scene.
But why? To me, it just seems so bizarre that he did it on that day. As in, it was a random day. There was nothing.
The media just happened to be out there on that day.
There was nothing. It wasn't the anniversary date.
But even so, wouldn't you just steer clear? I don't know.
Absolutely.
I just can't.
But you know what they say? They say that often murderers who dispose of bodies or dispose of evidence will go back and visit the site.
Yeah.
So that's
creepy as fuck.
I don't know what the psychology is behind that, but it's like, is it that they're checking to make sure everything's just so? Is it like a form of...
her body wasn't there anymore.
No, it had been removed, obviously. Yeah.
Ugh, yuck. But they were closing in pretty good on Boris with, this is that doesn't say anything that they can get on him in terms of evidence, I don't think. But
no, but it certainly paints a suspicious picture.
However, something else that was very strong evidence that they were able to bring to trial was something that happened a few months after her body was found. They didn't release the exact location, whereas by the time Vasco did go out, he knew where the exact location was. But to the public, it had not been released exactly where this location was. And a witness had come forward who had seen a black Mercedes in a particular location and a man standing next to that vehicle holding a shovel.
Yep.
Who fitted a description of Boris. So the fact that this guy was able to pinpoint a location that was very close to where the body was eventually was found, but without knowing where that location was at that point, this was a very strong witness that they were able to then pretty much, this was the nail in the coffin for Boris, that they were like, this is pretty big that we can go in and nab him.
Yep.
The other bit of evidence that they had found also was when they did do the search of the house, they did find on iPad some pretty suspicious searches that had been taken on there, including how police trace phones, how to delete mobile phone data, and how to police detect blood. So, he'd been someone in the house, which I guess could have been Sarah. Also, somebody was doing some searches on that iPad in that house. So those sort of bits of evidence were enough for the cops to, I think, at that point, go in and arrest Boris. I think that was 10 months after they had found the body. Is that about right? Yeah.
So I guess it's worth noting that, so Boris was actually arrested on the 13th of December in 2017 and charged with murder. He appeared that morning, so he was arrested at like 7 o'clock in the morning. He appeared that morning at 10 o'clock at the Melbourne Magistrates Court, and he entered a plea of not guilty. He was remanded in custody then with a court date of April the 18th set. Mm-hmm. So this is, 2017 that happened, late 2017. 2018 comes along, and on the 17th of July, there's a 2-week committal hearing to decide whether the murder charge will stick or not. And this is when all of the financial stuff came out. So I believe they'd sent the iPad and the laptop over to the States for forensic analysis, like so they could look. They had a forensic accountant look into exactly where the book stood, because of course they couldn't get any solid picture from Boris as to where things were. And this is where that over $1 million worth of debt was, like debt in terms of the business and their personal debts combined, was revealed. So at that point, the police are well, there's also a financial motive potentially here.
Yeah.
On the 3rd of August, he was committed to stand trial for murder. And on the 7th of August, they set that trial date for March of 2019. Yeah. And at the point, the justice said that the court hearing, the criminal hearing, would probably last about 4 to 5 weeks. Can you imagine how taxing that would be on Sarah?
Oh God, yeah. It's hard because I have such an opinion on where her head's at, and because I can't understand her thinking.
Yeah.
So
we can get to that a little bit more maybe after this, because I think that warrants a conversation in and of itself.
Yeah, yeah.
On the 13th of March of the following year, the justice ruled that post-offence conduct could not be used to prove murderous intent. So the justice was Christopher Beale. He was very measured in his responses, and he sounds like he's an incredible judge. And he basically said that Boris's behaviour after Karen's murder, now known to be murder, cannot be used as evidence against him in a trial, but that's kind of a huge amount of the prosecution's case.
Yeah, except for the witness,
of course,
things like that. But
they had the witness. Yeah. They obviously had her body, which didn't actually show that much in terms of evidence, aside from the fact that her body was obviously found in an area where his mobile phone had been found. And then, as you said, with that witness with his car and the shovel and the person that, they've described who, almost couldn't not be Boris.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a bit of a blow for the DPP.
I think so. I think their evidence was it was too circumstantial. It was, there was a little bit of leniency there, I guess, that could be, there could be a shadow of doubt, I guess.
Yeah, I get there's no reason that a circumstantial case can't win.
No.
In terms of a prosecution, but it is more difficult, and it's certainly something that would have been taken into consideration. So I think at this point a manslaughter charge was offered to Boris, and he declined that originally. But then was it 2 or 3 days before?
It was pretty close. It was very close. Yeah, I think it was 2 days before.
A couple of days
before
he was set to go to trial. He
backflipped.
Yeah, backflipped.
Decided to say guilty to manslaughter. Yeah, which was interesting in itself, because up until that point he'd been absolutely declaring that he was an innocent man,
but he still says he's not guilty. He's just basically saying, well, I see there's some evidence against me, and I think I'd be convicted if it went to trial. Yeah,
which is what he sort of pretty much holds to this day. But he's pled guilty to manslaughter. And then the sentencing.
Would you plead guilty to manslaughter if you hadn't?
There's no way in hell if I hadn't done it. Why would you do that?
No freaking way.
No. No,
I'd fight it to the nth
fight
degree.
to the death. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, so I mean, yeah, I think the evidence was reasonable enough that it was quite possible that he would have been convicted of that. So I think that, he's basically, I think his lawyer's given him the, dude, this is your only way out here. So yeah, he's taken the manslaughter, and then sentencing has occurred, which was very interesting. So when we get to sentencing, obviously, victim impact statements usually get read. And obviously there was, there was her brother and her sister, her auntie, all these sorts of people who gave victim impact statements. And but so did Sarah. And Sarah's victim impact statement was a character reference for her father rather than really a victim impact statement about her mum.
There was no mention really of her mum or the impact of the loss of her mum. Now this is a little, I say little, but she's a 21-year-old woman.
Yep.
She's got her entire life ahead of her. She has potentially a wedding or potentially children, other things that, she would want her mum around for because, as she states, they were incredibly close. The impact of that was not noted to the court, and it wasn't something that, she put forward.
No.
And her impact statement or character reference, as it turned out to be, would have carried the most weight. She was the most impacted by this.
Absolutely.
So she basically said in her character reference how amazing her dad is, how he's such
a loving father, misses her mum,
loves her mum, and she believes it. She fully believes it. Now, please go and watch the 60 Minutes interview with Liz Hayes.
Yeah,
love Liz Hayes.
She's great.
Because it's on YouTube. Go and have a look at it because this episode, I think, is incredibly telling about Sarah's state of mind and her position in all of this and how, Boris is basically controlling her from prison.
Yep. It's a clear case of coercive control. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what that is or how to spot it, watch that interview because that is the result of coercion control, 100%. Yep. No question in my mind. No. But just before we get to that, so the sentencing, we'll go into that a bit more. But the sentencing occurred so basically based on her character reference for her dad, and so much weight was put on that by the judge. He read out his statement at the end of which they have to do, like to give the sentence, he has to read a hell of a lot to justify why he's giving the sentence that he's giving. And in that he spoke about the horrific stuff that Boris has done and how the fact that he hasn't still come forward if he's, saying he's guilty, but he hasn't actually told us what happened, and all that. And it was very measured, but also very damning what he said. And then he got to the end of that to say what the actual sentence was. And he based that and weighted very heavily what Sarah said and gave him all of 9 years maximum with 6 years with parole, which is just atrocious.
Yeah, 6 years non-parole.
6 years non-parole, sorry. Yeah. So it could have been a maximum of 20 years. So 9 years is just pitiful. And the fact is that becomes case law. So basically, if there's another case of an intimate partner murdering his wife or girlfriend or something, then that this can then be brought forward as the standard, the precedent. And so that can then be used, and then all of a sudden, all of those sorts of cases start getting less and less time for these sentences.
It's disgusting.
It's really disgusting.
There was some revolting shit on social media about this too, where these hideous men were writing things like, if I'm only going to get 6 years, I might as well knock her off now.
Yeah.
And I'll be out in 6 years or whatever. It's just disgusting and it's not funny, and there is nothing okay about making, I'm not even going to say jokes, but they think it's funny. I don't know.
No.
It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
So the prosecution actually appealed the sentence and it went to the appellate court, And they were able to add on, was it 4 additional
years? So ended up with
still woefully inadequate.
Oh, absolutely. So 10 years non-parole, 13 as a maximum. So at this stage, he's looking at being released in 2027 at the age of 63. I mean,
so he's still got a lot of life ahead of him.
A 63-year-old man. I mean, he could come out and still, do this to another woman, have another partner, have another child, even at 63. I wouldn't put it past him. Who knows? He's still going to come out as a fairly young man. And I don't know. I think that's pretty poor for her life and what has been taken from her and what has been taken from Sarah, as much as she doesn't know that and how to think and believe any of the thing that's going on. It's just disgusting.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Should we get into that now about the Sarah side of things?
Yeah, I think so.
I was, we've had this discussion about coercive control and the way that it's incredibly impactful, and you've got some really good insights, and I know you've got some stuff that you want to say about this. Before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty of it, I think it's really worth noting that if any of the things that we're about to discuss are impacting you in any way, there are a lot of resources available, so please reach out. So in Australia, there's 1-800-RESPECT, which you can call at any time. We've got Orange Door, which you can go to for resources as well, and we can leave those links in our show notes too. But please know that if you identify with any of the things that we're about to discuss, please know that there are organisations that you can reach out to support you through this in the immediate instance and longer term too.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So, look, that interview with Sarah is absolutely heartbreaking. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, you watch her, she's a shell of a person. I mean, I actually noted when I was watching it that she's 24 in that interview and she appears very immature. And again, that's that result of that coercion and control, that he has made her not grow enough, and become. I mean, I know other women who, friends of mine who have lost parents, at young ages, not in these sorts of circumstances, yes, but it makes them grow up a lot faster because they've lost that parent. They, step into those roles and those adult roles, very easily and quickly. She hasn't done that. She seems still very quite immature.
She talks to her dad in prison twice a day.
Yeah.
She visits him, I think, weekly.
Yeah.
She's still very much beholden to him, and in the interview with Liz Hayes, she's asked a lot of direct questions about whether she thinks things have happened or what she thinks has happened or things about her dad being involved in the murder of her mum. And she never answers a question directly. I feel like you can really tell she's been coached in what to say, and Liz Hayes absolutely thinks the same thing. You can tell by the way she sort of pursues the questions, and also by the fact that she gets that expert to sort of review some of the interview.
Yeah, Laura Richards, who views it. Yeah, she's interesting.
She's awesome.
Yeah, so she's a behaviourist. She profiles and things like that. She's worked on a lot of DV cases. She was very impressive in her work that she's done, and she's watched this case out of interest more than anything from the get-go. It's in her field, but she watched that interview that Liz Hayes did back with her, and something that really stood out was how Sarah described her dad as charismatic, and I just can't with that, because charismatic traits are used to manipulate people. That's not a positive trait to have.
No.
If you're charming someone, you're manipulating them. You are putting a spell over them.
And who would describe their dad as charismatic?
Yeah.
There are 1,000 different words I can think to describe my dad.
Yeah.
None of them would be charismatic because I know him on such a different level. You might describe some, I don't know, person you might meet randomly and quickly as, oh yeah, they were really charismatic. They sort of engaged me very quickly. I just don't think the word charismatic is something you would use to describe somebody you know really well.
Yeah, same. I just find that really interesting. She found that really wrong, the way that came across. But the fact that she doesn't actually see that her dad has taken her mum away from her and that she should be the voice for her mum. And now, but what Boris has done is remove that from her life. So, I mean, I worry that when Boris comes out of jail and is in her life then physically as well as, in these, over the phones and things like that, she's communicating with him once she's actually physically there as well, that her mum becomes non-existent in her life entirely because she's won't be allowed to speak about her.
No.
Like, it would be so awkward to discuss with her murderer, about nice things about her mum.
I feel like they've never discussed it. Like, even early on, they just don't talk about her.
No, it's really odd. And
they just kind of pretended like it didn't happen or something. Like, it's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, I found that interview to watch was so frustrating. I mean, I was yelling at the screen. I wanted to shake her and just go, sweetheart, like, it's okay. You're allowed to be angry at your dad and you're allowed to have emotions and, and want your mum back.
But is she?
She's not.
She's not.
No.
She's not allowed. He has got her so under his spell that she is just towing the party line. She is sprouting all the shit that he sprouts to her. She's like a little parrot for him, I think. Because
absolutely.
If she actually... And look, she's probably protecting herself in a certain way as well.
Yep.
But if she took a minute or a bit of time and really reflected on what happened, she's a really intelligent girl. There's, I'm sure she would come to the conclusion and what has now been proven to be, and, he's been convicted of her manslaughter, so we know he killed her. She would surely come to the same conclusion. It's like in that interview, she has not allowed herself to even think about it.
No, she's not, because, well, the fact is, like, in those situations, the person who's being abused, you learn, I guess, to it's the path of least resistance. So she's learnt that she needs to be on his side, because being not on his side, well, that gets you killed.
Wow.
So, and then not that she will automatically compute that and think that, but there's a surface level understanding of that it's not safe for her to stand up for herself or for her mum.
Yeah.
It's not safe. She's not safe. I think, unfortunately, like, there's new laws here in Australia now over coercive control. But however, those laws are only for intimate partner. So, unfortunately, still those laws haven't gone far enough, because this is coercive control being done to still a family member. It's male to female, father to daughter, but it's not intimate partner, so therefore those laws won't apply. But I don't think that this man should be allowed out and released to basically be in her life now, potentially causing the same sorts of damage to her life that he quite clearly caused for Karen. I know that there was an article I was reading about how he's been moved from one jail to another, and it was being queried as to why, which they don't answer with those questions, why prisoners have been moved, but they did allude to the fact that it was most likely due to good behaviour, and the fact that he was, being moving forward towards reform. And it's like, hang on a second, this guy ain't moving, is not reforming. He's not learning from these things.
He still hasn't told the police or anyone what actually happened that day.
No, hasn't come out with that at all. I mean, as you were saying before, it's most likely this guy strangled her, since there was no blood found. I mean, if there was an accident, wouldn't you think he would just have come forward and said, right, yeah, it's manslaughter because I pushed her.
Like, oh my God.
Well, you would do
get
that.
Some help.
But let's say worst case scenario, he's gone through the process and he's got rid of her body. Like, but then, you've been caught, you fess up and you say, yep, I pushed her. She fell. I didn't know what to do. I've that's when I went and took her body and whatever. And that was the wrong thing to do. But there's some little layer of, empathy that you can have for that person, and potentially there's, possibility for reform and all those sorts of things. But this guy's next level, I reckon. And to me, he is someone who has come up and he has strangled, because that's full on intent to kill. That's not now manslaughter. That is first degree murder. I strongly believe that he's actually strangled her. Otherwise, he would have admitted anything else that went on.
Agreed.
Ugh, he's awful. But yeah, just getting into sort of the coercive control stuff a little bit. That look, the statistics are horrific here in Australia. They're horrific across the world. They haven't changed much over the last 10 years. Basically, the statistics have remained pretty much the same. They go up and down in various places at different times, but as a whole, across the whole world, they are shithouse for women. Just here in Australia, 74 women were killed in 2023, and by April 27th, which is the latest statistic I could find for 2024, already 32 women had been killed. Across the world, on average, a woman is killed every 11 minutes by a family member. Like that's not every, like this isn't just talking about women being killed. This is women killed by intimate partner or other family member. So the statistics are absolutely horrific. They did increase on average worldwide by about 11% over COVID too, which says a lot. So the more time a woman spends in her home, the more time more chance she's in danger, which is just absolutely wrong.
It's horrific. I know Indigenous women in Australia are 3 times more likely to be murdered at the hands of an intimate partner as well. Like, it's just horrific.
Yeah, minorities are even more impacted in terms of these sorts of things as well, which is just horrific. So just to sort of put a bit of, we want to make sure that these things don't happen. We want to put a stop to them. And obviously, as I say, there's laws in Australia now around coercive control, as well as obviously physical abuse. It can be also emotional abuse and all other aspects. So if you're not sure what coercive control even is, these are just 12 signs of coercive control from Relationships Australia. One being isolated from your support system, which is clearly what's happened to Sarah in this situation. Monitoring your activity throughout the day, so keeping track of you, which could be through devices or it could be literally phone calls to you, texting you, where are you, when are you coming home, why aren't you home yet, those sorts of things. That is coercive control. Denying you freedom and autonomy, which again, Sarah's being denied the freedom to grieve her mum and also defend her mum and be pissed at the person who's taken that from her. Gaslighting is horrendous. Unfortunately, the word gets a bit overused these days, but gaslighting is horrific to experience. It's basically when you are telling them this is what happened, explaining it to them, and then telling you that's not what happened. That's not how it happened. It's real manipulation, and it's horrible. Name calling and severe criticism is also coercive control. Limiting access to money and controlling finances. Financial abuse is horrendous. And with any of these, you don't need to have all these 12 happening to you for you to be in a coercive control relationship. It can be one of these and it is bad enough and you need to be getting out of that relationship. Coercing you or to take care of all the domestic duties in the household. They are not all female duties. Household should be a team. Everyone pitching in, everyone doing what they need to do in the household to take part. Turning your children against you, which would just be horrible. And using belittling you in front of your children or weaponizing the children against you, or in particular sort of or number 12 actually I jumped down to that one, sort of threatening your children or your pets in front of you. So basically using them as like weapons in that situation. Controlling aspects of your health or your body, so not allowing you to get to medical attention or exercising or getting the right amount of sleep that you need, making you get up and get to the kids earlier than the other person. It's all not okay. Making sure that you're, spending too much time in the bathroom, heaven forbid, have a shower and have some time for yourself in there even, like whatever. Yeah, that's controlling you in that way is not okay. Final one, regulating your sexual relationship. So, for example, demands about the amount of times you engage in sex or the kinds of activities that you engage in. So, as I say, it doesn't have to be all 12 of those. These are just 12 signs of coercive control and any of those are wrong. So please call 1-800-RESPECT if you are experiencing any of those. Or as here in Australia, if you're feeling unsafe, call 000. So I just want to make sure that we have everyone understanding that those sorts of behaviours are not okay. And I really in this situation, we don't want any more women losing their lives, and the more we can do to protect each other, make sure that you call it out if you see these behaviours. So if someone who stands by and watches these behaviours happen is just as culpable as the person who is infiltrating them. So everyone, let's look out for each other. If you call it out, the person experiencing it knows it's wrong too, and they can then feel confident to be able to step up and leave.
Absolutely. If you're not in Australia, if you're one of our listeners who live internationally, you can Google supports in your local, in your country, and please seek support. Find a friend, find a family member, somebody who's going to help you if you need that support and help. Or, you know, if, as Meg said, if the situation's incredibly volatile, your local police need to be there and assist you through that.
And they're getting better and better at being able to spot these things too. They're trained better these days, so you can reach out. Don't feel you can't.
Yep. Absolutely. That's a pretty heavy note to end it on.
Sorry about that.
No, I think it's incredibly important. And thank you so much for bringing that to the podcast, because I think it is incredibly important, and it is something that isn't spoken about openly enough, but something that absolutely needs to be. And the fact that, you know, we've got a little more context now around what coercive control is, that you can maybe spot that within somebody's relationship. You might be able to have that little chat with a girlfriend or a family member on the side and say, hey, I've just noticed this. How can I help you? And it might not be the first time you have that conversation with the person that they reach out and ask for your help or accept the help that you're offering, but persist with it because it's incredibly important.
Yep.
On that note, I think...
I also wanted to add, just quickly, that, like, yes, Karen Ristevski, I honestly believe, was a victim of domestic violence and quite possibly coercive control. But also she was a very beautiful person who was incredibly caring, and that's how she needs to be remembered, even if her daughter can't do it for her. She was someone who gave her time and her to charity. She, made clothing for people who had mastectomies during breast cancer and donated them to women to wear for special events and things. So I think that she just needs to be remembered as an absolutely incredible person as well. So,
Agreed. By all accounts from everybody who knew her, she was an incredible human being, and, you know, the world is a worse place without her here.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. Well, next week we're actually talking about Elizabeth Holmes, so it's quite a different,
quite a flip,
quite a different type of case, but another really interesting one for you. So stay tuned for that next Tuesday. We release episodes every Tuesday, so please come back, like us in your podcasting apps, please, because it really helps. You know, if you follow us, we can get our episodes out to more and more listeners. Meg is doing an absolutely stellar job of getting us out there on TikTok. So please, again, go and follow us over on TikTok. And
Emma's trying to convince me to do more crazy stuff on TikTok. Tell us if you want us to or not. I'm in the camp of maybe not.
I want to do like trending stuff.
Do the dances, is that what we do?
Yeah, I mean, you know, yes. We'll see who wins. Go and follow us over on TikTok and see who won that argument. All right, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Stay curious, crime besties.